Thank you to everyone this morning who has joined us for this incredible event of Women of Whistler. It's today's June 23rd, Tuesday, June 23rd. My name is Melissa Pache. I'm the CEO of the Whistler Chamber of Commerce. Usually with the Women of Whistler, we get into a room, we have cocktails and appetizers flowing, and it's usually in the evening and the kids are tucked away somewhere, or if you don't have kids, it's kind of, even more of a social gathering. But I'm pretty sure that I can speak for everybody that the disconnect, although it's hopefully very short term, is a big loss. It's a big loss. Well, I think especially in women, we love that connection, and that's part of what Women in Whistler is all about. So the good news for today is that this particular Zoom meeting has allowed much broader invitation to women across British Columbia. Thank you to the Women's Enterprise Centre for partnering with us on this program. So welcome to the Women of Whistler, literally. There's also a group of Women of Whistler Blackcomb that's on here, and then there's all sorts of women from around British Columbia. So welcome to everybody who made the call. I'd like to acknowledge that we're having this virtual meeting on the shared unceded traditional territories of the Squamish and Lillooet Nations. We honor their language, their culture, and their traditions. Thank you to all the members, the Whistler Chamber members, for your continued support for the chambers that we receive through your annual membership. And I can probably say the same for the chambers that are in different areas of the province. Your membership enables us to continue our advocacy efforts and bring events like this to the forefront. I'd like to thank all of our partners. Without them, these events are not possible. So presenting partner, Ryerson Company, is a law firm here in Whistler, and they've been supporting this particular event and others for over 15 years. So they have a huge connection to the Women of Whistler and the Whistler Chamber, as well, of course, as our community partner, the Women's Enterprise Centre. So we're excited to co-host this event with the Women's Enterprise Centre, with our first Women of Whistler event. So the purpose of the Women of Whistler, it's really early morning, I have my coffee, is to fuel personal and professional development for business women in Whistler, and in this case in British Columbia. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected women entrepreneurs who typically operate smaller businesses and have less access to capital. Many female business owners also still bear a disproportionate share of domestic work, caregiving, and childcare. To address these realities, and in keeping with the commitment to advance the economic empowerment of women, our government, Rachel, thank you for being here, is taking action. For our first virtual Women of Whistler event, we are joined by Rachel Bendayan. Rachel is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, who joined us back in April 21st on the topic of Canada's economic response. So welcome back, Rachel. Also joining us today is Dr. Wendy Cukier, founder of the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub and professor at Ryerson University. And last but definitely not least, our moderator, our guest moderator, Melanie Rupp, Director of Loans and Advisory Services, Women's Enterprise Centre, all here to lead us through a discussion on the support available to women entrepreneurs. So for those of you that have not used Zoom before, which I'm thinking by this time is nearly impossible, we're using the Zoom question and answer, Q&A. So at the very bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A for those that want to participate. Simply type in your question. That will come up as a question that we can see. And then if you like that question, someone else out there, you can actually vote it up so that it becomes a primary question, and we'll put it into our Q&A. I would like to now introduce you to our moderator, Melanie Rupp, Director, Loans and Advisory Services at Women's Enterprise Centre. So Melanie joined Women's Enterprise Centre back in 2018 and now leads a team of business advisors, loan assessors, client services representatives, entrepreneurs and residents who support women entrepreneurs around the province. Before joining WEC, Melanie worked exclusively with women entrepreneurs as a business advisor over 15 years through her own consulting business, and prior to that had a successful career in financial services. Melanie has been long connected with our community in Whistler here for over 45 years of being a lifelong skier, for the past 25 years a property owner. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Melanie. So welcome everybody. Take it away.
Thank you, Melissa, for the lovely introduction. I really wish I was in Whistler this morning with my second home up there. But I'm also really glad that we can meet together virtually while doing our part to stop the COVID-19 virus. It's my pleasure to be here with everyone and to moderate this esteemed panel of women leaders supporting women entrepreneurs. Before I start, I'd just like to give a brief overview of Women's Enterprise Center and the supports that we offer women entrepreneurs across the province. Women's Enterprise Center is a not-for-profit organization funded by the federal government through Western Economic Diversification Canada. We've been helping women entrepreneurs start, lead, and grow their own business for 25 years. Our loans, advisory, and export services, training, mentoring, and resources have helped tens of thousands of women entrepreneurs, created and maintained over 4,000 jobs, and generated over $2 billion in economic activity in more than 134 communities in BC. That's the power of women entrepreneurs. Across all of our programs, we build a supportive community that understands women do business differently. We also understand women in underrepresented groups such as Indigenous, immigrants, youth, and persons with varying abilities need support to help them access entrepreneurship as a pathway to economic independence. We have offices in Kelowna, which is where our head office is located, as well as Victoria and Vancouver. And we also have representatives on Vancouver Island in Courtenay, in Prince George, Terrace, and the Kootenay region. During the pandemic, all of our programs and services are being delivered virtually, so it doesn't matter where in the province you are located to be able to participate. So I want to get on with this morning's program, and it's my pleasure to introduce you now to our speakers. Rachel Bendayan, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. Rachel was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Outremont in February 2019. Over a period of 10 years, Ms. Bendayan built a successful legal practice at Norton Rose Fulbright in the fields of litigation and international arbitration, specializing in international trade law. Ms. Bendayan also taught at the Université de Montréal Faculty of Law. She later served as Chief of Staff to the Federal Minister of Small Business and Tourism. Mother to a toddler and deeply engaged in her community, Ms. Bendayan has a strong connection to the family she represents in the Montreal neighborhoods of Outremont, Mille-End, and Côte-des-Neiges. Sorry, my French is horrible. I'd also like to go ahead and introduce our second speaker, Dr. Wendy Cukier. Dr. Cukier is the founder of the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, which received $8.6 million through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy funding from the federal government. She is a professor of entrepreneurship and strategy and the founder of the Diversity Institute at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University. Dr. Cukier is a best-selling author and a multi-award winner, including a YWCA Woman of Distinction, a Woman of Influence, and one of the 100 Most Powerful Women by Women's Executive Network, and one of the 100 alumni of the University of Toronto, in quotes, who shaped the century. Wow, that's amazing. We'll start with each of our guests giving us a brief introduction. So Rachel, we'll let you take it away first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you for moderating this great discussion. And also like to thank you, Melissa, as CEO of PACE. You know, I think you have a unique understanding of what all of the women entrepreneurs on this call are facing at the moment. And, you know, I think as all of you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is having a disproportionate impact on women, and women entrepreneurs are no exception. So that's one of the reasons why when when I was approached for this opportunity, I really jumped on the occasion to be able to speak directly with women entrepreneurs once again. And as you mentioned, we spoke back in April as part of the Whistler Chamber, and I can't believe that how much has happened since April. Just only a few months later, but it feels like the world has changed several times over since then. So we are certainly at the phase, at least here in Montreal, of slowly and safely reopening some of our businesses, and I believe it is the same for you out in Whistler and in BC. We've heard different requests from business owners of all sizes and sectors. The tourism industry, for example, is facing different challenges from other industries, and we want to continue to be responsive to the various realities. And so this conversation is really important for me to be able to bring back your suggestions, your comments, your criticisms. I hope that we could be very honest with each other in order for me to speak to Minister Ng, to Minister Morneau, and others, and make sure that your voices are heard. So let me just very, very quickly, because I want to leave as much time as possible for the discussion, make sure that everybody on this call knows that we are expanding further the eligibility criteria for the emergency business account, or those CEBA loans, which are very, very popular. To date, close to 700,000 businesses across the country have been accepted for this loan. It's interest-free. It's backed 100% by the federal government, and part of it is non-reimbursable, so you can keep a grant as part of this loan, and that is why I really do encourage everybody on the line to reach out to their financial institution if you haven't done so already. Your local bank, the one that you have your account with, will have all of the information as to how to access this loan. And more recently, for smaller and newer businesses, which I know women entrepreneurs are very active in the startup field. There has been some announcements of new funding available through the regional development agencies. So I hope that you are reaching out to Western Economic Diversification and other organizations on the ground that could help you access this funding. I'm thinking in particular of startups that have told me that they don't have the historical experience necessary in order to access the CEBA or other programs. We created a special program just for these companies. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention some of the very specific things that we're doing for women entrepreneurs with Minister Ng really leading the charge on this in cabinet. The Women Entrepreneurship Strategy is something that I was involved in as Chief of Staff in a previous lifetime, and now I have the honor of working very closely with the Minister to implement. And so this is targeted support for women entrepreneurs in particular. The Ecosystem Fund is a key pillar of that strategy, and it was launched back in 2018. It's in total a $2 billion strategy, which is actually closer to about $5 billion when you include the work that's happening in other areas in order to support that strategy. And we did announce additional funding as part of our COVID-19 response for the strategy, in particular to support the ecosystem further. And I think that it's been very well received. I know that probably more is needed, and I'm certainly pushing for that as well. And one of the reasons why women entrepreneurs in particular, might be having difficulty, and this is something that everybody, certainly me at home with a toddler and everybody on this call probably knows, is that we all wear different hats. And with daycare and schools, being what they are at the moment, it is hard to juggle everything. So one of the things that Minister Hussein and others in cabinet have done, certainly led by the Prime Minister, was increase or provide a top up to the Canada Child Benefit. I know that this doesn't solve all of the problems, but I think just being aware of the fact that costs are increasing for parents, that there are additional things that we need to pay for, and that additional support is needed, is important, I think, to acknowledge and to act on. So perhaps I could just mention that we closed out the consultations on the emergency wage subsidy. This is an important program, and even though we closed out those consultations, I was speaking yesterday to Windsor Essex Chamber of Commerce, and they were providing additional comments. So I'm certainly still in the process of collecting feedback on the wage subsidy, if you have any. I would say that now is really the time. This week would be a good opportunity before we roll out the specifics of what that will look like going forward. As we've said, the program parameters remain in place, currently for the month of June and all the way until the beginning of July. And I believe by July 6th, we are looking at rolling out some new criteria and adjustments again in light of the comments that we're receiving. So if you have any comments, I hope that this discussion will provide a venue for you to communicate those. And perhaps just one quick thing on the tourism sector. I mentioned at the beginning how important that is to your region, and it certainly have been hearing a lot from the tourism businesses. They are often seasonal. They're often not in the exact same position as other businesses. We decided specifically to invest, and we're talking about almost $1 billion through the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. So again, you can access that funding through WestDev. And there will also be, I just got off the phone a few minutes ago with Minister Jolie's office. She is making an announcement in 15 minutes regarding the tourism industry in the Atlantic and in Quebec. And we'll be rolling out something for the Western provinces a little bit later, and so we are very much in the middle of trying to get support out specifically to the tourism industry, because we know how difficult things have been. I guess I would end it there. I think that it's important that we provide time for our other wonderful panelists and obviously for your thoughts. But suffice it to say that I think Minister Ng, whether it be in her conversations around trade at the G20 or leading the Ottawa Group for Reform at the World Trade Organization, we always have women entrepreneurs in mind, and we are working very closely with Export Development Canada, with BDC, to make sure that all of the actors in government are attuned to this. I think you've seen some changes at the BDC in the last number of years, and that's very much driven by our interest in supporting and increasing the number of women entrepreneurs in Canada. And so with that, I think I'll pass it back over to you, Melanie, and I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. We've covered everything, so many different programs that are available for women entrepreneurs. And I must say, over this period, I've been so impressed that the government is listening and taking in the feedback. So we'll come back to you with some more questions, but I want to encourage the participants who are listening, please type in your questions either into the chat box or the Q&A. As you have any questions, any feedback, any concerns, put those notes into the chat or the Q&A, because this is your time to get your questions answered and to hear feedback from Rachel and the government perspective. So let's move on then to Dr. Cukier. And Wendy, let you take it away. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much for including me. And I just wanted to provide a bit of context about what the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub does and does not. But before I do that, I did want to echo Melanie's comments about the federal government. It's, in terms of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, it's the first time any government has taken a whole of government approach. So the $2 billion that was targeted at women entrepreneurs and building the ecosystem, transformational. But what, in my mind, and I'll talk more about this, is even more important is the commitment to apply a gender and diversity lens across the entire government. So if you think about it, $2 billion is a really sizable investment. But if we look at the investments that are made in the superclusters or in the economic development agencies or even in, agriculture, if you apply a gender and diversity lens to all of those resources as well, if you start to build in accountability and tracking around where the money is going and not going, that is truly transformational. And if you look at the mandate letters of all the ministers, they all have accountabilities around this. So along with some of the legislative innovations that have been introduced, Bill C-25 is one of my favorite because it will extend comply and explain legislation to 55% of businesses across the country. That's going to have a huge impact on the attention these issues receive. I think we do have to acknowledge that this government really has paved the way in terms of applying a gender lens to economic development and innovation. I think that the response during COVID has been quite remarkable. And, the programs that normally would take a couple of years of meetings to have meetings, would have taken place in weeks rather than months. So I do think it's important to start with that and quickly plug in my computer, which is going to die. The second thing I wanted to say is that am I still there? Yes.
Yes, we can see you, Wendy.
Sorry?
Carry on.
Okay, thank you. Is that the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub was one of the projects that was funded as part of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. And we're sort of what I would call the B2B play in this, in that our role is not to support individual women entrepreneurs, but rather to try to knit together the organizations supporting women entrepreneurs. So we really are trying to strengthen the innovation ecosystem with a focus on bringing to bear research, evidence of best practices, strengthening connections and networks, helping with pathways for women. Because what I would argue is that in spite of the amazing work that's being done by, for example, the Women Enterprise Centers across the country, including, of course, in BC, which I think has a particularly strong regional ecosystem, and the various organizations targeting women in technology or in particular sectors, I don't think we have a system that functions as well as it could, in that the whole is not more than the sum of the parts. We see women coming in one door, participating in a program, finishing the program, and not really then having anywhere to go. So one of the objectives of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub is to really try to improve the connections between different parts of the innovation ecosystem, and to help with that pathfinding through the system. We're focused very much on using evidence to inform practice. And so one of the things I think that I have found in this work, as well as our work on diversity more generally, is that many of the experiences that individual women entrepreneurs have are actually shared across large segments of the population. And the research shows that clearly, that it isn't in your head, that women do face barriers, that stereotypes do have influence, that the processes and procedures have been designed for the most part by men for men. And we have really good evidence that reinforces the fact that those things are not figments of anyone's imagination. They actually exist. And if you overlay that with other kinds of diversity. If you look at racialized women, particularly Black women, if you look at Indigenous women, if you look at women with disabilities, if you look at women with different sexual orientations and gender identities, and on, you find that the barriers and the challenges are compounded. Some of these are structural, so that we know that many women entrepreneurs are among the fastest growing segment of small businesses in the country, but it also means that their businesses are newer, they're more vulnerable, they're the seedlings, if you would. And so they are almost by definition more affected by things like COVID. Couple that with the fact that women are more likely to be in the services industries, which we know are being decimated. And on top of that, while women account for 15.6% of SMEs with one or more employee, they're 38% of self-employed Canadians. A lot of the programs, at least initially, were designed for SMEs with employees rather than for people who are self-employed. And it's credit to the government that they pivoted so quickly. But we have to recognize that those structural differences, the differences that Indigenous women face in terms of trying to get financing because they don't have a property in the same way that off-reserve women would have. All of these issues, in my view, have to be really well understood when we're looking generally at our economic development and innovation strategy, but most particularly when we're looking at the impact of COVID. And, you know, someone smarter than me said there's no recovery without she-covery. And I think everything that we can do to ensure that that gender and diversity lens is applied to the current situation entrepreneurs are facing, but also to the programs and the strategy around recovery is really critical. And that's something that we're quite passionate about. And I'll end it there.
Wow, that's just the depth of knowledge that you have. And when you say someone smarter than me, just Wendy, your depth of knowledge around these issues, I think, is a real contribution to helping us understand women and women entrepreneurship. So it's great to have the women entrepreneurship knowledge hub working together with the ecosystem across the country. So thank you very much. We have a couple of questions here, and I'd like to encourage others to ask questions. So maybe we'll start with those, and then we also have some other questions here I can ask. A question about information. I'd love to hear some further information regarding startup and small business funding. I'm in the startup phase and would appreciate any information specifically regarding grants or funding opportunities available. So Rachel, or certainly Rachel, from a federal government perspective, what is the government's intentions of where to find this funding?
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. And I echo your sentiment regarding Wendy's depth of knowledge and experience. And one of the things that I just find so important about what you said, Wendy, is really that you feel like the gender and diversity lens matters, you know. And I sometimes wonder whether these kinds of things get lost in government speak. But I do agree with you that, you know, just analyzing every policy across every department, you know, throughout government through the gender perspective makes a huge difference as to how government approaches all questions and all issues that come to it. So I'm glad to see that you feel that it has a real effect on the ground. And with respect to the question that you just asked, Melanie, I think it's a great one. There are you know, as Wendy mentioned, you know, things that we've done over the course of the pandemic in order to respond and make sure that nobody was left behind. I think that the $1 billion to our regional development agencies is really, you know, the tool that we put in place in order for startups to get access to funding. And as I mentioned, WestDev, you know, in your region, Western Economic Diversification Canada is there to to receive your application, and certainly it's about how startups can access funding. And that money is really dedicated only to those businesses like yours that are excluded from other programs. And so it really is there for you, and I would encourage you to apply for it. Otherwise, I also wanted to mention the Business Resilience Network. This is not a grant or funding, but it is a partnership program with the private sector and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to provide expert accounting and financial advice to entrepreneurs. And so perhaps there are things that you can do as a startup and growing small business that you might not otherwise be. Certainly this free service, is really intended to make sure that you take advantage of perhaps there are provincial or municipal programs that you might be eligible for in addition to other federal programs. And so I think that having that free service, and it's only available now until July 3rd, is still very useful because it's very hard to keep track of all of the different programs at all of the different levels, and I think the Business Resilience Network is getting great feedback from entrepreneurs. So I can make sure to put it in the chat or to have Melanie
Yeah, I think
give
Wendy,
out that 1-800 number.
Yeah,
we
just did that. So it's in the chat, Rachel. It's Melissa here, but I did put it in the chat, so they'll be able to reach with the phone number.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, great.
Super.
Thank
but
you.
That's great feedback about startups, and I would encourage.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Great information. I think the question that we get a lot from women entrepreneurs, or that we hear in general, is where do I find that locally? So it's great that exists. So we've got the phone number for the Business Resiliency Network, which is very helpful to answer questions. And it's always been important that you go to the source or someone who can give you the correct information so that you don't run around in circles because someone's giving you incorrect information. And I'd also note that the information changes so frequently. To go to a source where they have the most up-to-date information is going to help you get what you need the soonest. Locally in British Columbia, of course, Women's Enterprise Center. If you have specific questions, if you're a startup, if you want to know about funding, all of our resources are complimentary. So there's no cost to reach out. Send us an email, go onto our website and look. We have a dedicated COVID-19 page with resources, and we do regular webinars. And ask to speak with someone, a client services or a business advisor, who can answer your specific question and point you in the direction of the right resources or help you find the next step.
And Melanie, that's also in the chat room as well. So
okay.
I've added the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub website, as well as the Women Enterprise Center. And just for everyone to know that we will be sending an email out with all of this information as well post event today.
Yeah, navigating the information and figuring out which one is applicable to your business is very challenging. So it'll be nice to have it all in one email. So, right. Wendy, anything to add to that question?
Well, I'm surprised, Melanie, that you didn't mention your recent partnership with Van City, because, I think there are a lot of really interesting and innovative programs that are springing up, and it just points to the importance, in my mind, of having access to human capital as well as financial capital. Often we hear, and Melanie and Melissa, I'm sure you've heard this as well, that women need not just the access to money, but they need the advice. They need navigating. One of the things that we're putting a lot of emphasis on is trying to make sure that self-employed women understand what the advantages might be of incorporating, both in terms of reducing risk and getting access to a wider range of programs. We're also trying to encourage some of the organizations like Export Canada to take a broader view of what it means to be export ready, because I would argue that digitization and helping women businesses transition to the digital environment is part of what will make them export ready and available to to explore international markets. And we know that that is one of the key. I was on a call earlier today with the Organization of Women in Trade. We know that encouraging women businesses to think globally about their opportunities is especially important for those in services, in food products, in health and beauty, which are areas where women often are more concentrated. So I really would reinforce Rachel and Melanie and Melissa's point that, you know, you're not in this alone. There are lots of people that will help you get the money that you need and deserve.
Yeah, thank you for that, Wendy. The partnership with Van City, where they've introduced a women entrepreneurship loan, is terrific, and that loan is supported by the Training and Development and Mentoring of Women's Enterprise Center and all the resources. So it's really nice to have a financial institution who is formally connecting us to support their women entrepreneurs, because as you say, you're not alone as an entrepreneur, and when you have the support not only to get the financing you need for your business, but also that's wraparound support to help you deal with questions and to connect you in with resources, is just, it helps women entrepreneurs be more successful. So, great, thank you. Let's move on then to a next question. A similar question: as a woman entrepreneur in the tech and HR industry in BC, I never know where to look to get funding and support. Aside from CEBA, is there a place for me to find information on all these programs?
So
Rachel.
yeah, the canada.ca /coronavirus website is something that I check when I wake up every morning. So I would encourage you all to do the same. As you mentioned, Melanie, things are changing rapidly, and that website is being kept up to date quite rapidly, I'm happy to say. And so that would be a great spot. You'll see on that website that there are several different tabs or links: support for individuals, support for businesses, and then you'll have a series of others. So I would go to the business supports to see what might be interesting for you. You know, as you mentioned, we have been trying to adapt. Originally, the CEBA loan was only for businesses that had a payroll quite high, $40,000 in payroll at least, and then we reduced it to 20, and now we're reducing it to 0. And so all of these things, I hope, are helping to gain access to these particular programs. Certainly, if you are a small business that has rent, you know, there is also the rent assistance program. I think that you know, there are various provinces that are trying to make it a little bit more interesting for our landlords to sign up to those. And I would also mention some of our quote unquote regular programs. I don't know if you're familiar with IRAP, but as a tech company, that could be interesting for you. And certainly, I would. You know, there's the Canada Innovation website, which has a lot of interesting programs for tech companies. But through COVID, I think your best bet would be to go to the landing page, canada.ca /coronavirus, and also to our women entrepreneurship centers. You know, whether it be through leaders like Wendy or Melanie. I think that there are a lot of interesting programs out there for women entrepreneurs that you know, you might not be aware of, and reaching out to mentors. You know, as Wendy was saying, the connections that you make and the advice that you get is almost just as important as the financing, and sometimes leads to financing. So I think that could be an interesting avenue. Wendy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I'm glad you mentioned IRAP and innovation.ca. I think there are other programs specifically that can help with research. For example, if you need access to clever graduate students, both through things like MyTax, but also the different student subsidies, hugely important in my mind, and something I've been pushing a little bit hard to expand, because I think during the COVID crisis, access to youth a kind of national youth corps could be massive, especially in terms of digital skills and transformation. I also want to give a shout out to our partner Venture Labs, which is based in Vancouver and part of a network of tech incubators across the country. There are many of them. I'm sure UBC as well has access, but there are sector-specific resources, networks, accelerators, and in fact, VC networks that are starting to look more seriously at women. So one of the things that I'll just mention it now is on the WEC website, we've created an Ask Give platform, basically adapted from something that CEO offers. And we're trying it out, but the intention is to allow women from across the country to connect with others and people who have assets, to connect with people who need help. It's a good place to try to find very specific support. You know, if you're working in semiconductors or developing digital platforms, for example, and you need very specific advice, that's somewhere that you could try finding assistance. But there are lots of in fact, historically, there's been a lot of focus on technology. The digital superclusters, getting plugged into those can really help with supply chain connections, making sure that you're plugged into government procurement. Lots and lots of sources of funding. It really depends what stage you're at, what specific kinds of technologies you're developing, and whether your focus is finding investors, or you're just looking to make it through the next few months, or you're looking to grow your markets. And I think organizations like the Women Enterprise Center and some of the others that were mentioned can help you navigate some of that.
Melanie, if I could just do a quick plug for to answer this question, but also for everybody. We created an app, an application called the Canada Business App, for lack of a more inventive title. But you go in and they ask you a series of questions about your business. And then all of that information gets stored, and so they will push out notifications anytime a granting program or opens up for applications, or there's a new program that might apply to you. And so that could be a really interesting way to kind of keep up to date. It's certainly something that we did in response to people like yourself saying, I'm an entrepreneur, and what is out there, because it's hard to navigate. And so I'd really suggest trying this app out and letting me know if you like it.
That's great, Rachel. Yeah, there's just so many resources out there, and we frequently get either people don't know where to find it, or so those are great places to look and do your research. And then I'd encourage people to contact Women's Enterprise Center, because we do make those referrals, and we can look at your specific situation and look exactly what you need individually, and then make a link to which one might be most appropriate. So instead of having a whole list of 100 different options, we can help you narrow it down to 5 or 10 that you can dig into deeper. So there really is a lot of support. And Melissa, I hope you're taking notes so we can include links to all of these.
I do my best.
Yeah.
Genevieve Clement just posted the app, so that's great.
Yeah, that's great. A couple more questions. Whistler's a tourism town, and I just wanted to talk a little bit more about specific supports for tourism. I noticed, and I can't remember where it was, that there was, maybe it was Destination BC had some grants for tourism, and so helpful. Any comments specifically on tourism that might help businesses in Whistler specifically?
Well, we are looking at modifying the wage subsidy program, for example, in order to better support seasonal businesses who might not have the comparison required. As I mentioned, Minister Joly is making announcements specifically for the tourism industry, so additional money available probably through WestEv once again. So that's a very good place if you're a tourist or seasonal business to go. And I guess I would add as well, just the fact that we need to understand a little bit better where where each part of the country is at in terms of their reopening. Here in Montreal, the situation is different from other places in the country. Certainly different from the Atlantic, that also has a big tourist industry, and I think quite different from BC. If I remember correctly, and I've been trying to follow as best I can, BC is announcing that it's opening up its borders, or has announced that it will, and so yeah, I hope that
Fingers crossed.
Exactly. I hope that helps, tourism, because what I'm hearing a lot of is people looking for vacation spots here at home in Canada. And so I was speaking to folks in my riding the other day, saying that they wanted to go to BC, and did I know when they could book their vacation. And so I think that there's going to be an uptake in local, or at least Canadian-based tourism. I don't know if it'll compensate for the traffic that we are normally used to in Whistler and in BC, but certainly important to do that advertising. So from the government's perspective, at the federal level, we have Destination Canada, and Destination Canada has moved a lot of its funding from its international marketing to domestic marketing. Each of the provincial destination crown corporations then report to the provincial governments, and so it's very possible that Destination BC is rolling out a marketing strategy, which is great, and we're certainly working very closely with Destination Canada to do nationwide tourist marketing here at home. So those are some of the things that I would say with respect to tourist businesses in particular, but again, I think the situation will vary whether you're a hotel or a campground operator, or perhaps you do whale watching or other activities. There will be different supports available for different sectors within the tourism industry, retail, hospitality, and others. So certainly stay tuned for new announcements, but also please let me know if you're able to access some of the programs that we have put in place. For example, we made very sure that the wage subsidy program would be there for you whether or not your employees are working, and that's something that some entrepreneurs hadn't realized. Even if your employees are not doing anything at the moment because your business is still closed in BC, you can still use the wage subsidy and pay your employees. So we will continue to take back your feedback if there is anything else on this call that people feel that we need to tweak for these programs. But let me just look at my, I think that kind of covers it. Again, I would go to
very good.
I would go to WestEv as your first stop in order to stay informed on new initiatives.
Great, that's very good. Yeah, good coverage. Wendy, could you talk a little bit more about the sharing platform? And I think you do orientations and let people know how to use it, because I think that's a really great resource that if you haven't asked, but also if you can help somebody, it's a really great platform to share not only locally, but all across the country. And the help you need might not be available in your own community, but certainly there's other people across the country. Can you just share a bit more information about that?
Sure. If you go to the WEC website, you can check it out. And it really was credit where credit's due. It really was Vicki Saunders from SheEO who developed this to support what she has, which is a very tight community of entrepreneurs, and others were looking at it and thinking this might work for us. And so we partnered with the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, as well as other organizations, to try to make it available across the country. It's just starting out, but we have a number of leaders from across the country, people like Val Fox, who was the the founder of the Digital Media Zone and knows everything there is to know about technology. Shannon Peston, who was with ATB and Alberta and kind of a wizard at financial issues, and others who are there on a regular basis to try to make sure that people are getting matched with others that they need. The real, I think the thing that so many women need during this time is understanding that they're not alone, that they are part of a community, and anything we can do to strengthen both local organizations like the chambers, like the Women Enterprise Center and their networks, but also to link those networks to other networks can really make a profound difference. And one of the things we're trying to do, certainly I would not at all want to downplay the devastating impact that COVID has had on people. And, we're working very hard to try to address the crushing burden of childcare and homeschooling. We've developed, just bootstrapped, the development of a free tutoring service where we got volunteer students, put them on a platform and connected them initially with Black families and other marginalized communities to try to support homeschooling. There are lots of sort of innovative little pockets of services and projects that are springing up. And what we're trying to do is identify as many of those as possible, share them so that we can scale and replicate what works and what doesn't work. And I think it is worth noting that during COVID, we are seeing massive innovation. We are seeing, women who made candles and bath salts and sold them in local hairdressers and barber shops suddenly develop digital platforms and make those available globally. We're seeing businesses, tourist businesses, in fact, that are shut down because they don't have access to customers, really focusing on building their digital presence worldwide, using AR and VR, for example, to provide virtual experiences to build that demand. So when the travel restrictions are relaxed, people are rushing to visit them. We're seeing health and beauty spas, for example, that previously provided services and yoga classes and everything else in a face-to-face environment, figuring out innovative ways to provide those services online. So I do think that one of the things we have to remember is that necessity is the mother of invention, and there are really interesting and innovative solutions cropping up across the country, and we're hoping that some of those will also be shared so that, for example, Van City's partnership with the Women Enterprise Center, I think very clearly is the best practice. We would love to see other financial institutions pick that up. We've seen examples of crowdfunding platforms operating on a very local scale that could be transformational at a national level. We've seen examples of, new online boutiques and services that also provide incredible opportunities for businesses that might have previously thought of themselves as very local and targeted, suddenly open up huge markets. So I think we need to take this opportunity to also think about what we can do differently, because I do think there are huge opportunities.
Yeah, I like that, thinking differently about how we do things and connecting that people are not alone as entrepreneurs, and there's so much information out there. It's, I think, you knowing what it is that you're looking for and then following up on the resources that are available. And even if you connect in with one, because the ecosystem is so well connected and getting even more connected over time, you can go in at any point and then be referred to what it is that you need and help shorten that time to find things.
I might just
we have sorry, go ahead. We have time. We have 2 minutes left before we need
okay,
just looking at questions.
Very
Go ahead,
quickly, I just
Rachel.
wanted to give a huge shout out. Wendy just mentioned an article, an initiative that was mentioned in a Beta Kit article today, and it's the Van City, partnering with Women's Enterprise Center to launch the Unity Women's Entrepreneurs Program, which offers loans. And so it's such great news, and I didn't want to steal your thunder, so I'm glad you mentioned it before. And it's just fabulous for our women entrepreneurs. So I'll let you, Melanie, get to perhaps 2 more questions.
Yeah, just add that partnership is, we now know how to do it, and we're happy to share with others if they want to do it, how we did it, as well as partnering with other financial institutions. So that's good. Yeah, a couple of questions here. Let's go to the top. I'm a small business owner and often find that I miss the collaboration/mentorship of being part of a larger organization. Which of the organizations or others do you recommend for someone looking for mentors or a peer network of women entrepreneurs? So I'll put in a plug for Women's Enterprise Center.
Exactly.
We have a mentorship program. We do both one-on-one mentoring relationships as well as peer mentoring in groups. So check it out with Women's Enterprise Center. A question about how many businesses have been helped by Western diversification to date with this new funding model. Well, I don't have the exact numbers, but we did hear from Western diversification recently that they are overwhelmed with applications. So, continue to apply and access that, or come to Women's Enterprise Center. We also have a loan program. I think maybe one more. I'm a professional and self-employed landscape architect. I have a hard time finding information and mentoring and finding geared toward women professionals. This could apply to architects and engineering, etc. So
I think that's right back to you again.
Yeah. Well, Women's Enterprise Center, and I would say, if you have an industry organization where you want more content for the women in your industry, we're happy to partner with them, as are other organizations in the ecosystem, to get information for your women members, which I think would be a good way to go. So connect with Women's Enterprise Center, have a look at the resources at the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and bring those resources into your industry, and even form a women's group. And also connecting in with the Women of Whistler and all the great resources that they bring, and that's great. So
if I can just add one thing to that, because we know that home services, renovations, landscape architecture, all of those things are a very weird industry where people like me are desperate for help and others are looking for work. And the connections between the supply and demand are not always as effective as they need to be. And I think there's an enormous opportunity for developing women's collectives where you bring different service providers together and leverage each other's client bases in order to scale. Because real estate agents, if you think about it, real estate agents are always worried about staging properties. People who are building decks often have access to clients who also need their landscaping done. I think there's some really immense opportunities for innovation in the professional services area, and often the innovation comes from building partnerships with people who are serving the same clients but with different kind of product offerings. And I think there's some interesting work going on in that space.
Right.
So many possibilities. I'd just like to thank you both so much for the information that you've brought here. Is just so rich in content and detail. And what I find especially sort of encouraging and motivating is to have a representative from the federal government here who has done so much for women entrepreneurs to support them, and then to bring in the
Absolutely.
Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and then to have locally in BC, British Columbia, and then locally in the community to have such a strong Women of Whistler organization. I mean, I think this is the model of best practices. So thank you all very much for, and thank you, Melissa, for hosting and organizing today. It's been a tremendous session.
You know, I agree with everything you've just said, and certainly the team at the Chamber for helping to collect all this information and then moving it forward. So again, thank you to Rachel and Wendy for joining us today from the distances that you're at, and of course, Melanie and the Women's Enterprise Center for your continued support in the Women of Whistler. And I'm already having, and I'm sure Michelle Radcliffe and Lauren and everyone that's part of the Chamber is looking at this going, okay, what else can we do with the Women of Whistler? So I've been very stirred up with this conversation. So I just want to say thanks to everybody. We are recording this. So what we do with this is we will be not only sending an email out post-event, so within the next 24 hours or so, with this webinar. It'll also include some of the incredible resources that we've talked about, and a short survey. So we'll send that out, but we're also going to post this video on our website at whistlerchamber.com so that it can be accessed over time, because again, I'm going to go back to it. I could not write down fast enough all of this great intel. So again, thank you to everybody on the call and the women that are joining us. There are a couple of gentlemen that joined, so again, fantastic. Before we leave, I wanted to share with everyone also that the Women of Whistler has been offering a $500 scholarship to the Whistler Secondary School student every year. And this year, the scholarship received an incredible act of generosity in honor of Thelma Marie Johnson, who passed away this year. So she was at the helm of the Whistler Chamber for 20 years, right back when he was in a trailer. And instead of asking for a celebration, she asked for a chair to be created, and so to give back to this group, the Women of Whistler, and to the community. So this year, instead of just having one scholarship for one person at the school, we actually were able to give 4 away, which is fantastic. So we continue to grow our resources. We continue to grow this Women of Whistler, now Whistler, Women of Whistler and BC. And thank you, everybody. It's a very powerful hour, power hour. So thank you, everybody. And we will definitely hopefully talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Someday I hope to get there. Thanks.
Yes, please do. Look us up. You know where we are now. Take care. Thanks again, Rachel. Bye.